All right, how you guys doing? This is Mr. Muscarella coming at you, and I'm going to show you a quick video on how to get Desmos Project 1 done. Now, Project 1 is going to ask you to do several things. So the first thing we got to do is create 2 sine and 2 cosine functions. So we're just going to create a total of 4 functions. Now, one of each type, so I got to have one positive sine graph, one negative sine graph, and the a value cannot be 1 or negative 1. So we've got to pick a value different than that. The period, whatever the period is, when you figure that out, it cannot be 2 pi. And then make sure to include both a horizontal and vertical shift for each one of these. So for the horizontal shifts, be sure that the b and c values are multiples of each other, because that'll help you out a little bit. So here's examples of some that are multiples of each other and others that are not multiples of each other. So we'll kind of play around with that as we get to that momentarily. So the first example, when we look at multiples of each other, you see how the 2x and 4 pi, you've got 2 and 4, so those are multiples of each other. And even though on the one below it, 2x over 3 and 5 pi over 6, if you were to double 2x over 3, you would get 4x over 6. So both of those would have the same denominator, so they would be multiples of one another. So you're good there. However, if you look at the ones that are not multiples of each other, obviously the b and c values in that first one of 2 and 5 are not multiples. Neither are 1/3 and 1/4. So they're not multiples of each other, so you can't do that. All right, so here is what we're going to do. We're going to use Desmos to create a picture of our graph, and we've got to include all of these things that are listed here in our graph. Now, we will go through that, each one of these things one at a time. Then once you get done creating your 4 different graphs, you are going to answer these 4 questions down here that are below this, and be sure to use your spelling and grammar. Now, for the project, you can type your equation in here and then just fill in the information for amplitude, period, units, vertical shift, and phase shift for each one of those. The picture, so you can put the graph of it underneath that, because it probably won't fit right next to it. So just put your graph right below where it says graphs of function, and just be sure to label it example 1, example 2, example 3, example 4. All right, and that's that. And so here's a couple examples right there. All right, so first let's come up with one problem here. So we're going to do this problem together. Now, by now you should be okay with how to work with this and find, the a, the b, the c, and the d values given a sine equation. So notice I've got 2x and 4 pi minus 4 pi. So yeah, those 2 values right there, they are going to be multiples of each other. So those 2 values are multiples of each other, so that's good. That's what I want. So you do the arithmetic and apply your formulas correctly to find each one of these pieces: your amplitude, your period, the vertical shift, or your midline. And be sure you can describe it too. Make sure you describe the vertical shift using the words up or down and by how much. Same thing with phase shift. When you get done solving bx minus c equals 0 for the phase shift, you're going to solve that for x. Make sure you use the word right or left. Now for the phase shift, whatever value you get for x, if that is a positive value, you will move to the right that amount. If you were to get a negative value, of course, you would move to the left that amount. All right, so that's our phase shift component right there. And then lastly, for the units, our formula for the units is the period divided by 4, or 1/4 times the period. And when we do that in this particular example, our period was pi, so when we plug that in here for the period, we get a value of pi over 4 for our units. So that's just a quick recap of the information you're going to need to find and then be able to put into the graph. So let's now go to Desmos and put those pieces in our graph. All right, so first thing we're going to want to do, of course, is put the equation we came up with, y equals 2 sine 2x minus 4 pi minus 1. We want these to be in our first graph. And then we have that part. The second thing we're going to want to do, whatever the vertical shift is, or the midline, we're going to want to type that value next. So y equals, in this case, -1. And notice we can change the color by going over here. So I'm going to change that, to purple. And I'm also going to make it a dashed line. So we can see that that's a dashed line there. Now let's go ahead and get our table set up the way that we're being asked to. So hit the wrench button for your graph settings, and we're going to go ahead and set up our x-axis. So the directions say have your window go from -2 to positive -2 pi to 2 pi on the x-axis. So when you come down here, you're going to just type in -2, and then you can use pi, and that'll change that to a pi. And then we have 2 pi for that part. Now our units on this one, when we found our units were pi over 4. So whatever that unit value is, in this case pi over 4, that's what we're going to type in here for the step value. That's what we're going to type in here for the step value. So the step value is pi over 4. Now if I look at my graph, I can kind of see everything right here. So that's part of my graph. Now the other piece it says is to go one more and one less than the highest and lowest values. So I want to look at the y value here, and the highest y value is 1. And if I look at this gray dot over here, I'll come up with a -3 for my lowest y value. So I want to go down to -4 and then up a little bit past 1. So on your settings, I'm going to go from -4, because that's 1 less than -3. And I want to go 1 more than 1, which is 2. And then I'm going to change my step value, make sure your step value is 1. And that's all we need to do to set that up. Go ahead and save your graph if you want, because you're going to come back to that later on. Now, in order to get a picture of our graph, you can do a screenshot of it any number of ways. And if you wanted to download a picture of it, you can click on the share graph, and you've got this option here to export that. And I think we were going to go with thick, and what was the other one? I think it said thick settings and a large rectangle. So here in our options, we would go large rectangle, and then we click here to download that, and that'll take our our graph right there. Then we would simply insert that picture right below here and say example 1, and then we could go ahead and either insert that picture or do a paste the screenshot that we just took. Either one is okay. So we would do that, and we're going to do that 4 times. Now we did that for a sine problem. Now the other directions, it said make sure you do 1 positive sine value and 1 negative sine value. So I'd go through that same process again with a different equation, only this time I would make sure that the a value is negative. So when it comes to typing that in, I want this number right here to be a negative number for in front of sine. I'll repeat that process doing 1 positive and 1 negative value for the a value for cosine. And then once you've got all 4 of those done, you will be finished with this project. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and hope you have a great day. Peace out, my mathletes.